Madhava Kunda Bihari Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Damodar Radha Damodar Hare Jaya Goranithai 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 Jaya Goranithai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jai Om Vishnu Pada Mr. Divine Grace Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Ki Jai Iskan Tanga Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Granthad Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Oh Premananda all glories to you, some of the devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gaura Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 11, verse number 17. Pratrivyam enam tad adabraviryam upekshaya ditam apramataha Gururharishcharano pasanastro Jahivya Vyalikam Swayam Atmamosham Vratrivyam Enam Tad Abhadraviryam Upekshaya Ditam Apramataha Gurur Harishcharano Pasanastro Chahivyalikam Swayamatmamosham Ratrivyam Enam Tad Abhadraviryam Upekshaya Ditam Apramataha Guru Harishcharano Pasanastro Chahivyalikam Swayamatmamosham Triviam enam tadabhadraviryam Upekshaya diditam apramata Guru pasanastro Chahivyalikam Swayamatmamosham Ratrivyam enam tad abhadraviryam Upekshaya Jitama Pramata Guruhis Charano Pasanastru Jahi Vyalikam Swayamat Mamusham Pratrivyam, the formidable enemy. Enam, this mind. Tat, that. Abhadraviryam, very, very powerful. Upekshaya, by neglecting. Adiritam, unnecessarily increased in power. Apramata, one who is without illusion. Guru, of the spiritual master. Hare, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Charana, of the lotus feet. Upasana Astra, applying the weapon of worshipping. Jahi, conquer. Vyalikam, false. Swayam, personally. Atmamosham, which covers the constitutional position of the living entity. Translation. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. Repeat after me. This uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful and will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. It covers the constitutional position of the soul. Okay, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Do this with great care. Prabhupada's purport. There is one easy weapon with which the mind can be conquered. Neglect. The mind is always telling us to do this or that. Therefore, we should be very expert in disobeying the mind's orders. Gradually, the mind should be trained to obey the orders of the soul. It is not that one should obey the orders of the mind. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say that to control the mind, one should beat it with shoes many times just after awakening and again before going to sleep. In this way, one can control the mind. This is the instruction of all the Shastras. If one does not do so, one is doomed to follow the dictations of the mind. Another bona fide process is to abide strictly by the orders of the spiritual master and engage in the Lord's service. Then the mind will be automatically controlled. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has instructed Srila Rupa Goswami, Pramanda Brahmate Kono Bhagavanji, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. When one receives the seed of devotional service by the mercy of the Guru and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's real life begins. If one abides by the order of the spiritual master, by the grace of Krishna, he is freed from the service to the mind. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 11th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Jad Bharat Instructs King Rahugana. Om Agyan Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmaya Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sa Shri Rupam Sagritatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namoste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, is a pretty basic verse in Krishna consciousness because, as we all know, coming out of conditioned life, I grew up just as a regular American kid, acting all crazy, and coming to Krishna consciousness, reading Prabhupada's books, starting to come to the temple and associate with the devotees, and hearing the regulative principles and everything is involved. I was coming to the temple, this isn't exactly, it's the mind, of course, but I was coming to the temple about 2 months and I was into it. And I knew this was Krishna consciousness is the absolute truth, and I had to be a devotee. I had to surrender. Anyway, and after I read the Bhagavad Gita, started coming to the temple. But so every time the curtains would be at Artik with the devotees, and everybody would bow down flat on the floor, including all the women. Everyone would just hit the floor hard, and not hard, but everybody would bow down, dandavats, not just say dandavat pranams, Prabhu, actually, but actually dandavats. And it took me 2 months of coming to the temple before I could bow down. And yeah, I had never seen anyone bow down to anyone before. It's not something you do in the United States. I never heard of bowing down before, and it took me 2 months. Of course, the main thing is I'm a very conditioned soul, and I just wasn't humble enough to bow down. There are many devotees who started coming to the temple. Of course, Indian devotees they have a tradition of offering obeisances, bowing down when they come in a temple, but uh, when in the 70s here in the United States, nobody ever bowed down to anyone. So, but many devotees started doing it right away or almost right away. Well, it took me 2 months, but because it's just my rebelliousness against Krishna, not wanting to surrender. No, I knew I had to surrender, but definitely not quite ready for it. And anyway, so it took a long time, but that's where we're coming from to one extent or another. Everyone is uh, everyone is everyone is very conditioned in material life. I heard Prabhupada say this morning on a morning walk. He was talking about famous example that he used, and that we continue to use, uh, is of the frog in the well. One frog, his friend goes to the ocean, comes back, and tells the frog in the well that he's seen a huge expanse of water, and the frog in the well, he can't imagine how big it is. He tries and tries to imagine it, but he can't imagine it. He's never seen the ocean, and and that's and Prabhupada made a point there that I've been hearing that example for a long time, but I never heard him make this point before. That and it's such a simple thing, but I had never heard it or thought about it before. And he he said, uh, you there aren't any frogs. I think he started by asking, is a morning walk? And I think he started by asking his disciples who were with him, have you ever seen a frog in the ocean? And so he said, no, you've never seen a frog in the ocean. And he said, why not? And the one disciple offered the logical thing that I thought of right away, of course, is that, well, they're not a saltwater animal. And Prabhupada, he said that's the logical, scientific thing to say. But Prabhupada, of course, he knew that. But he said, no, the reason you've never seen a frog in the ocean, never mind all the scientific, whatever scientific explanation you have. You've never seen a frog in the ocean because they don't live in the ocean. They've never been to the ocean. They can't go to the ocean. So that was like an extension of the argument that as conditioned souls, we can't imagine the spiritual world, the Krishna's pastimes from our conditioned point of view, because we can't see them from a materially conditioned, from our materially conditioned mind, our understanding, our experience, our realm of perception and thought. We're not. It's not open to us as conditioned souls, and so it's a very simple thing, but extension of the example. But it's an important point. Is that no? It's the conditioned souls, as conditioned souls, nobody can see or understand the spiritual world unless somebody comes. Krishna comes in many incarnations, like the waves of the ocean, and we've all been to the ocean, or probably all been to the ocean. And you've sat on the shore and seen one wave after another coming in, coming in. They were coming in before you sat there, and they'll be coming in long after you leave, one after another, one after another. So that's an example of the how Krishna comes to the material world. Krishna has to come here to display his pastimes and inform us about the spiritual world and attract us back home, back to Godhead. And he sends his representatives one after another, like Srila Prabhupada, like all the acharyas in disciplic succession. He comes time after time and sends his representatives time after time. That's the only way we can know anything. Like I've heard of, uh, you're from South Africa, right? I've heard of I've heard of, let's say Johannesburg. I've heard of Johannesburg. I know it's a city, but a big city with a lot of people. But I've never been there. I can try to, I can think, well, it has roads and streets and cars and people and big buildings, but I've never been there. I've never seen it. I can't really know it. But if I talk to a Gari and he says, "Oh yeah, you can go to this park and you can visit that place and this place, and my house is in that section, and I went to school, college, in this section, and he can tell me all about it, and by that, to me, before that, Johannesburg is just it's not like a mythical place, but it's just something in my imagination. I've never been there. I can't, and that's just within this material realm. But when he tells me about it from his own experience, and it becomes real to me, and I can see, oh yeah, I could go there. I think I could. I think I could go there, and I understand a little bit about it now. So it's the same thing with Goloka Vrindavan. Nobody can imagine Goloka Vrindavan or the Vaikuntha planets without having heard of it from in the Shastras and from Krishna's representative, from Prabhupada. If we hadn't heard about Goloka Vrindavan from Prabhupada, and if we had heard the name somewhere else, or the Krishna and Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys and the gopis and from other source, yeah, so we're not hearing from Prabhupada, then we would have thought, "Oh, that's Hindu mythology," and we would have left it at that. I would have been like, "Oh, it's interesting." Like when I was a kid, I read Roman, Greek mythology and Roman mythology, some books, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's interesting, but it certainly wasn't real to me, and it would have been like just like that if I had read a book of Krishna's pastimes or the Mahabharata and demigods. So we have to have someone coming directly from Goloka Vrindavan to tell us about it from his own experience. And that's Srila Prabhupada. He's a resident of Vrindavan, and he is sent here specifically by Krishna to preach on his behalf and attract us back to home, back to Godhead. We can now when we hear about the local Vrindavan, it's real to us. We don't have very much realization of it yet, very much experience of it yet, but it's a real place to us now. It's a real transcendental, spiritual place to us, and we want to go there. We want to go there because we've heard about it from a resident of Vrindavan. So it's just like that, and that was just if the frog in the well, he could hear about the ocean from his friend who went to the ocean, and then he may think, well, I'd like to go see the ocean too. It sounds pretty awesome. But before that, he couldn't think about it. He couldn't think about it. So, but now we can understand Krishna. I heard Prabhupada say the other day in a class, room conversation, he said, you can't understand the Chaitanya Charitamrita unless you're very advanced." And then he said, you can advanced means that you accept that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So you might think, you heard the first part, well, I'm not advanced. I can't understand Charitamrita. Maybe I shouldn't read it. But then he said that if you accept that, because it's that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, you're advanced. And so all the devotees are, we're not like everyone else. We're very, very different from everyone else. We're like them. We used to be exactly like them. Certainly I was. And used to do everything they did and think everything in the way that they thought. and we were like them, but we're not like them anymore. We're like them. They're pure spirit soul, and we're pure spirit soul. They can definitely be devotees too. They are eternally, real, intimately related with Krishna in their eternal identity as Krishna's servants, but they don't know it now, and they aren't acting like that, aren't thinking like that right now. So we're not like them. We're advanced in that sense. We can't understand. We don't understand the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the way that Prabhupada does, or Ramananda Roy does, or Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami does. We don't understand it like that. But we understand when we read it that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that all these pastimes are his transcendental, eternal pastimes. We understand that he came to inaugurate the Sankirtan movement to make it possible, not only possible, but easy for the heavily conditioned souls uh, to go back home, back to Godhead. It's a very easy process. And I don't mean to imply that it's easy, like you don't have to do anything, like or you don't have to follow any rules, you don't have to try to control the mind and struggle with the mind. Not easy in that sense, but it's so easy because by any comparison to the previous methods of transcendental realization in previous yugas, Lord Chaitanya has made it very easy. Sing and dance and take prasadam. And then and Prabhupada says, if you're inclined, then you study philosophy. So we're all at least somewhat philosophically inclined, and Prabhupada wanted us to be like he wanted us to read his books. You heard we read in Boston the other day, reading the offerings of the disciples to Prabhupada on his appearance day. One of them we read was from Jayapataka Swami, and the main point he made in his offering to Prabhupada was about reading his books. You talked a lot about taking the Bhakti Shastri tests and the other exams, subsequent exams, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhaktivedanta tests, and becoming very educated in Prabhupada's books. And yeah, that was most of his offering to Prabhupada. It was about reading his books. And I told after class, of course, none of the other devotees in the temple room were around in the 60s or 70s, 80s. Everyone was, everybody else was um, 40 or maybe a little more than 40 years old. So no, but all very great, nice devotees for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And nobody was around and nobody else was there in those bodies in the 70s and in the 60s and 70s. And I told them that in early ISKCON, first of all, there were no other books. Maybe somebody like Pradyumna or some other very studious intellectual devotees had some books from the six Goswamis or Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but by and large, there just weren't any other books other than Nectar of Devotion, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Sri Ishopanishad, Bhagavad Gita as it is, the first several volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and some first volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita. there weren't any other books, and pretty much everyone read all of Prabhupada's books. And the devotees back then, not that everybody back then was extremely scholarly, although all the devotees are very intelligent. We all know from our experience, just personal everyday experience, that all the devotees are very intelligent. Not everyone is very studious. I'm not, and but all the devotees were well read, quite well read in in all of Prabhupada's books. All the books weren't out yet, and devotees was a big event when a new volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam was sent to the temple, just one or two in the beginning, and then cases of them. And as soon as any new volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam came out, or the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, devotees took them out in the parking lots right away to the airports and the parking lots and distributed them. Oh, I forgot to mention the Krishna book when I was mentioning the books that were out. Anyway, my only point is we should, all the devotees, can read other books. And so many devotees do now. They read so many other books. And of course, the books by Prabhupada's disciples, and there are many about Prabhupada, are extremely valuable also. But the foundation of everybody's study, of our study, should be Prabhupada's books, and as far as I'm concerned, books about Prabhupada by disciples who were with him, who can tell us from their own experience about being with Prabhupada. It's the most valuable thing. And so, but we saw the primary source, not only primary, but overwhelmingly primary source of all our understanding and knowledge about Krishna consciousness, about going back to Godhead, should be from Prabhupada's books and his lectures, listening to his lectures, his morning walks, his room conversations, his public lectures, his bhajans, his japa. Prabhupada's voice is coming directly from Goloka Vrindavan. You don't have to go to Goloka Vrindavan to hear the sounds of Goloka Vrindavan. Just listen to Prabhupada's voice. And if we do, and we become committed to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's disciples, most of Prabhupada's disciples are either left their body or not so active because of health and age and one thing and another. There are so many, and over the course of time, there won't be very many, and eventually any left. But the disciples of Prabhupada in disciplic succession, his grand disciples in disciplic succession, will carry on Prabhupada's mood and are carrying on Prabhupada's mood and will continue to do so, and dedicated to them in disciplic succession, and our disciples, grand disciples of Prabhupada, great grand disciples, great grand disciples, on and on. And we try, and we just keep at the forefront the mission of uh, uh, preaching. Prabhupada says here that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati used to say that to control The mind, one should beat it with shoes many times just after awakening and again before going to sleep. In this way, one can control the mind. This is the instruction of all Shastras. If, if one does not do so, one is doomed to follow the dictations of the mind. Another bona fide process is to abide strictly by the orders of the spiritual master and engage in the Lord's service. So I'm not very good at beating the mind. I know when I'm thinking something stupid or thinking something crazy, I know, and I chastise myself. One of the best instructions I ever heard for uh, uh, controlling envy was because there are a few of my favorites, but one of my most favorite ones is like about 45 years ago in the Boston Temple, and there was during the Sunday feast, during the lecture, and in the hallway outside the kirtan or the lecture, either the kirtan or the lecture, we were setting up the prasadam tables, putting the preps on and starting to make plates to set out in front of the guests when they sat down. So we had a line of people who were serving out the prasadam, and there was one lady, her and her husband started coming to the temple in like 1968 or 69. Very nice devotees. And uh, the woman's name was Yola, wasn't initiated yet. And she had a son, she had one son at that time named Krishna Das, and he was about 5 years old. And he was up on the third floor with some of his young friends, and they were playing around. And the way the Boston Temple is, it's open in the middle from the first floor all the way up to the fourth floor, so you can hear everything that's going on all the floors. And she heard her son, little kid, playing with his little friends, and they were starting to fight or something. And she knew her own son's tone of voice, that he was getting a little out of control. And she just yelled up the stairs to him quite loudly. She just yelled, Krishna Das, don't be envious. And uh, and uh, and I thought that was really good. I never forgot that. And so, anytime over the years when I recognize with envy in my heart, in my mind, in my behavior, I just chastise myself, like, look, don't be envious. And that can be, it's as simple as it gets, but that can be very effective. You can just chastise yourself. If you feel angry towards another devotee or feel whatever, like pride is not good. Krishna doesn't like us to be proud. But just a little, a simple thing like that can be extremely effective in controlling the mind. You can just stop you right in your tracks. The Krishna Das was probably heard her tone of, I'm sure you heard her tone of voice, and he must have calmed down right away. He's a good little boy, obedient to his mother. So basically, we're obedient. Basically, we know we want to be nice devotees. We know what we have to do to be a nice devotee, and what we have to not do to be a unruly, uh, not nice devotee. We know what we have to do and what we not, shouldn't do, and we can recognize things in our minds that come up that aren't good, but so we can chastise ourselves for that, and it can be very effective. And but the main way to control the mind, because it's a Krishna consciousness is a long, long process, and many, many years or lifetimes, who knows? But it's not the matter. Most of us aren't in the position of seeing Lord Chaitanya and becoming pure devotees instantly. Most of us aren't in that position. Most of us are struggling with our mind, our senses, and unwillingness. Prabhupada said Krishna has a causeless mercy on the conditioned souls, and the conditioned souls have causeless unwillingness to surrender to Krishna. So we have that causeless unwillingness to surrender. We have anger, greed, lust, envy, everything.